what I would call it is like active defense. You could think of something like that, or informed defense is a better way to describe it. So realistically, today in the world, without us, imagine without this capability. So you already have this need to have people who can handle, I would call it a diverse selection of threats that they're coming to them. Some are low-end attacks, and some are very sophisticated high-end attacks.
We've all heard about cyber attacks. It seems there's a new article or clickbait headline about them every single day. But what can we do to stop them? Better yet, can we predict them before they ever even happen? David Monnier of Team Cymru is here this week on IT Visionaries to talk about cybersecurity, the importance of a no-touch audit, and how when it comes to global cybersecurity, the best offense is always in active defense. IT Visionaries is powered by Salesforce platform. If this episode makes you want to go deeper into the data security world, check out salesforce.com/data security. and download the IT Guide to Data Security and Governance to learn how to protect your customer data with Salesforce Security Portfolio. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of IT Visionaries, and today we have Dave Monnier. He is a team fellow at Team Cymru. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Albert.
All right, right out the gate, I want to spell the name of the business right. Cymru for everyone out there that wants to look up Cymru. It's got a unique name. So Dave, I got to ask, you got to tell us the origin of the name, and more importantly, you got to tell us what is exactly that you guys do.
Sure, Albert. So our name comes, it's the Welsh word for Wales. And we happen to have founders who have Welsh heritage. And at the time, they were working at another company where it was common to have internal team names, and they named their internal team Team Cymru. And then when they decided to part ways, the name stuck so well that they kept it. So here we are today, Team Cymru. So, but what do we do? So, we've changed a little bit over time as time has gone on. Really, what we have identified ourselves being best at is kind of helping understand risk and how it impacts organizations. And risk, I know, can be tricky to kind of pin down and call it specifically. Risk is always this one thing, and it's not. That's not the case. Risk is this big collection of things. What we realized is that we had, by way of providing service to the internet as a whole, that we had the ability to understand what was happening on the internet at any given time, because we partnered with ISPs, IXPs, transit providers, those types of folks. We had been helping them for a very long time to make the most out of commoditizing their networks and ensuring that they're getting the most value out of them. And in return, we were blessed with some visibility that much of the world would struggle to kind of come by, barring SEAL teams and submarines and things like that. But we realized that this access that we had, this visibility that we had, really lent itself towards understanding not just what's impacting you, but how do you relate to what's impacting the global internet? So, it's one thing to know that someone has come and maybe rattled your doorknob, but to have it in the context of, did they rattle every doorknob in the neighborhood, or just houses that look like mine, or just my house, for example? And that type of context, that type of clarity is incredibly powerful. And so what we've realized is over time, we started as kind of like a threat intelligence, botnet business, and then we kind of migrated into applying IOCs and even some attributive intelligence and helping people catch people and things like that. But what we really realized is that an overall global visibility and providing context to understand the risk that businesses face, so that they can prioritize. For example, there are CVEs published every day, and how do you prioritize which of of those CVs to address. Well, if you had some knowledge, some understanding of which of these were being exploited in the wild, by who, towards who, this type of contextual awareness, that would help you prioritize what decisions you need to be making. And that's how we're approaching risk these days. So that in a nutshell is what we do.
All right, so I want to paraphrase what I think I just heard, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong. So maybe there's a lot of security organizations that maybe focus more, let's say, in my zone or on my location or in my network. I say, hey, I'm going to protect my infrastructure. But you come at it a different approach, which is you're saying, hey, not only am I going to protect your infrastructure, but I need to understand what is happening in the global internet infrastructure. It helps me to better understand what exactly is this attack or abnormality. Is this an attack? What is this? Kind of giving you like more scope over any foreign activity that you see inside a company's infrastructure.
Absolutely accurate. Yeah, that's it.
Got it. I mean, I'd love to hear. Like, it makes total sense that this would be helpful, but I didn't know if you had a story or like an example of how this knowledge helped you identify something maybe that if I didn't have that knowledge, I would not have been able to identify. That way our audience can really understand, like, this is super beneficial.
Just in context alone. So like to understand your place in the landscape, right? I'll use that same example of understanding if someone is targeting you, or understanding if you're just a victim of some type of randomized attack. There's still a lot of noise that happens in the internet. A lot of people are operating within that noise to their advantage. It's not uncommon at all to use DDoS, for example, to move in attacks. Wouldn't it be great to know more about your adversaries and what their tactics were, who else they've been targeting, things like that. And that type of clarity happens. Our partners use that regularly. They are able to take an event and unravel it and understand this is who did it to us. This is who else they're doing it to. In some cases, this is who they're working with. And that story, if you will, is one that our partners live every day. We are a regular component to a lot of teams' capabilities, in particular where they have let's call them reoccurring adversaries. It's not uncommon for them to pick regions, to pick specific financial assets that they're in pursuit of, maybe down to specific bins that they're looking to work. So to have a tool that gives you that kind of visibility from the rest of the world is very powerful to those teams, because it helps them prioritize and know the difference between small-time people versus big-time people as far as the threats go. And that's a regular occurrence for them. I don't have a specific story, that I could share from them, but I can tell you that, that it happens every day.
This phrase that Team Cymru uses, I didn't know if it was specific to you or is this an industry phrase? Threat reconnaissance. Is that what describe threat reconnaissance for me?
When you think of it in a tactical sense, the reconnaissance phase of an exercise, it happens to us all the time, right? So if you are running some infrastructure somewhere, there are people who are poking, they're prodding, they're looking for, trying to understand what your attack surface looks like. They're trying to understand what your infrastructure is made of. All of that is reconnaissance being done to you. With our capability, with our Pure Signal platform, we're able to turn that around and allow good guys, if you will, to conduct reconnaissance on the adversaries that are targeting them. And turns out to be very, very powerful. In particular, like I was describing earlier, where there are adversaries that are picking specific sectors to attack, they tend to have similar tools and tactics that they use regardless of who the victim is. So if you're able to kind of study and watch their activities, even as they're attacking not you, maybe other people in the world, but you're still learning from those capabilities, that reconnaissance applied to your security practice, we like to call it threat reconnaissance.
We've had a lot of security professionals on ITV. You're the first company I've heard of that is talking about actively going to find the threats. There's a lot of companies, of course, that evaluate a threat once it enters their infrastructure or attempts to penetrate their infrastructure. I think I mean, maybe someone else does it, but I think you're the first person or first group to openly state you're doing this. Is that something that's prevalent in the industry? Would you say like a lot of the industry is doing that, as in going to find, almost like, I mean, find reconnaissance is like you're going to find information. Like, is a
Right.
lot of the industry doing that, or is this unique to
No,
maybe a small subset of the industry that's trying to do this?
yeah, I would say it's probably a smaller subset of the industry. The limiting capability is access to the insight, so that you have something to even look at, right?
Right,
The
right.
internet, is a collection of signal. You have to have as much of that as possible to even facilitate this exercise, right? So that's what we've been able to do, and that's what we make available. So it is a unique capability to us in many ways. There are people who do some of what we do in certain aspects, but there's really nobody but us who kind of has put it all together, if for lack of a better word, in the way that we have. So it is probably fairly unique to us.
What would a company need to start? I mean, give us an idea. Like, what are some things, whether it's operational, technical, process oriented? What would someone need to do to start doing this? Because this sounds like something that, look, we've talked to enough security professionals to know that this is a hard game. Protecting yourself is a very hard game. So it seems better, to play a little offense than than only defense, right? Most companies, if I were to use a sports analogy, are defense oriented, but this sounds like it's offense and defense. If I
Yeah, to
wanted to
some
be in
degree. I try not to use
yeah.
the word offense for what it's
Okay,
worth,
okay.
because that implies a whole nother thing,
All right.
which we're for sure not
Listen,
doing.
nobody listen to me. I'm not the pro. You're the pro. Okay, no.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. But no, offense is a whole nother ball game, and that's really not what we're doing. We are what I would call it is like active defense. You could think of something
Gotcha.
like that, or informed defense is a better way to describe it. So realistically, today in the world, without us, imagine without this capability, you're already, as a practitioner, you're already dealing with incredibly advanced adversaries out in the world, as well as a whole sea of kind of medium adversaries, and then an even bigger, let's call it a galaxy, then pool of least talented adversaries, right? So you already have this need to have people who can handle, I would call it a diverse selection of threats that they're coming to them. Some are low-end attacks, and some are very sophisticated high-end attacks. So I would say you already have the need to have an advanced capability in your team, ideally. If you're relying entirely on sensors, if you're relying entirely if you're relying entirely on commodity IOCs, you're probably already behind the curve for what it's
Mm,
worth. If you're just subscribing to an IOC feed that isn't tailored to your specific business or your specific threats that might be facing you, you're probably a little behind. So I would preface what I'm about to say with the idea that you already understand the threat landscape well enough to realize that you have to have some expertise. So building on that, though, what our capability is two parts. So we have an attack surface management capability, which is easier to use than our pure signal recon platform, in the sense that a lot of the components are kind of decided already for you. The product's called Orbit, and it has kind of an outside-in view of your capabilities or of your infrastructure. But our real powerful capability in that teams are using is our recon platform that people are, again, using to essentially surveil the adversaries that are after them. In order to kind of work with that, you have to have teams that understand how the internet works, what the internet looks like, and I don't mean it, in a physical sense, as in like bundles of fiber and copper around the world. But I mean, what does it look like when somebody, for example, creates a secure shell connection between one host to another in an IP TCP/IP network scenario? What does that look like? What's a three-part handshake handshake look like? How many packets would you expect to see there? This type of, for lack of a better word, let's call it nitty gritty kind of view and understanding of being able to interpret what the internet's signal looks like, and that is a key piece to kind of making use of the insights that we have and applying it in the security practice, is having, for lack of a better word, I would say broad operational understanding. Not broad in the sense like you have to know every protocol and how every thing works, because you can look those things up, right? But you do have to have kind of a starting point of understanding what network communications look like. For example, where do certificates come into play for TLS SSL? What does a banner look like for a service? These types of kind of normal things. When you think of what the internet signal looks like, you need to have somebody who can take those little pieces and assemble it into a story and then make some sense of it. But again, like I said, much of this comes with what I would consider to be the base requirement of being a security practitioner on the internet today. You kind of have to have somebody who knows this stuff already, because the spectrum of adversaries you're facing go from really, really, really talented to no clue at all, and they're working equally hard at all layers of that. So you kind of have to have somebody who can tell the difference between those things anyway.
We understand that currently today, when we have a company and we're operating any type of internet company, we're relying also on vendors, partners, different people are in our organization. There's so much happening. Like there's so many, and then the way modern technology stacks are built is we're flowing data through vendors as well, third-party applications. Give us an idea. Does this stuff, could this help almost identify a vulnerability that's about to happen in one of my partners? So imagine let's use payments, because that's a lot of companies use payments online, right? Is this something that where threat reconnaissance could identify potentially across the internet, a global attempt or a massive attempt to try to, break like pay rails to capture credit card data? I'm trying to get an idea of I guess how you guys are looking at things.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely possible. In the scenario that you just gave, for example, we spot prefix hijacking. It's not uncommon for us to see that type of stuff where someone hijacks somebody else's network by way of BGP advertisement. They convince, hey, everybody, I'm actually Visa. Send me your, communications, whatever. That type of stuff happens. And we do see it in our platform. We have hundreds of BGP listeners around the world that are kind of watching for, hey, what's the AS BGP path for each autonomous system out there, because this type of stuff shouldn't be changing often, but it does. And when you spot that kind of jitter in the AS pathing, you can spot hijacks and things like that. It's definitely possible. But so threat reconnaissance, aside from being able to watch adversaries, it is very possible to watch any other network asset. I mean, you can identify anyone. It could be your suppliers, could be third party components that you're reliant on. Could be for merger and acquisition. It could be someone that you're planning to acquire. We have partners who do this all of the time. That we refer to it as kind of a no-touch audit. You're able to just not have to take someone's word for it. For example, let's take a scenario where you have, let's say you have a supplier obligation. You're a company, you have insistence that your suppliers are conducting, let's say, proper patching, proper updates. Well, you could take the security reconnaissance model or threat reconnaissance model and apply it as a security control and look to see, do we see our suppliers reaching out to the update servers? Do we see them reaching out for these updates? If we don't, then it's possible that they're not actually doing their updates, and we might, perhaps need to leverage our audit capability and actually reach out to them and say, prove to us that you're doing these updates, because it doesn't appear to us you are. That happens pretty often. We have a couple partners that are doing that as their primary use of the tool, where they're helping. They have really large supplier networks that they're absolutely reliant on, and they're going out and helping their suppliers maintain their security. And it really was helpful for them in the sense that they had this really rigid set of rules for their suppliers that they had to be following these things, or they would risk their ability to be a supplier to them. But if you think about it, your suppliers, if you put a rule in like that says, hey, you can't supply to me anymore unless you do this, this, and this. Well, if they don't meet those requirements and can't supply to you anymore, you now have a gap in what the supplies you needed. There was a reason they were a supplier to you. You need something from them. So it's in your interest to kind of help these people out, right? And we have partners that do that for their supply chains. They're helping their supply chains monitor for breaches, monitor for updates, monitor for changes in their attack surface, things like that, where they're kind of taking instead of this we have this big brother rule that says you have to live by all this or you're going to get kicked out. Instead is like, sure, we have these rules, but we're going to help you be able to live up to them because we're reliant on you and our business needs you as a supplier to us. And it really changed the psychological experience for them, for their supply chain, because their supply chain didn't feel this overwhelming, oh, we better get this right or else we're going to be in trouble. Instead, they had more of a sense of, we're in this together and look, they're helping us solve these problems.
I have never heard that. I come from a place where, I remember trying to sell software into like Coca-Cola, and they would put a lot of, like you described, a lot of requirements, security, penetration requirements. We had to get certified by a third party. We had to do all kinds of stuff to meet their requirements. And it was more, like the first version you described, which is, hey, this is your job. You got to do it. If you can't do it, you can't come in. But now it makes total sense that if it's a mission critical or a key component that you need in your supply chain, software supply chain, no matter what it does, it makes total sense that companies are now trying to help each other solve this problem. One of the things I think about, and I want to give a shout out to our sponsors here, Salesforce put together this research product. It is called the Salesforce Platform Security Report. And anyone who wants to read it we'll link it below in the show notes. But they talk to all these IT leaders, CISOs especially, and they talk about this distributed team challenge that's occurring right now, right before our eyes. And the number one thing they talked about was third-party security management. The number two thing that they were super concerned about was keeping up with compliance and regulations. And then third most talked about thing is mobile device security. This is what these were the top three concerns CISOs had. From your perspective, you kind of hit on number one right out the gate, which is, I think, the most pervasive one. Is this what you're seeing as well? Like what your clients are most concerned about? How are the minds of CISOs being shifted, or their focus being shifted now that distributed teams are, it's here. Like it's never going back. I think we're not going to be able to pull people back in the office that are knowledge workers. I just don't see it happening. I mean, people have too many optionality to be remote now.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. I think anybody who has the "you must come to the office" rule is definitely not going to have the same selection of staff as they would have if they let them work at home.
Knowledge work is just transformed fast,
Completely. Yeah. I also would agree. I don't expect we'll ever go back to offices like that. We do see exactly what they've described there. We're a little less involved in kind of the policy stuff, but I don't doubt it. I would absolutely expect, having to be able to adjust to kind of regulatory pressures. That's not going to be changing anytime soon either. Those are just going to continue to grow. I mean, our federal code continues to grow. I've never heard of a reduction. Same with our taxes and so on. All these codes just grow and grow. So that's going to keep going the same. But the last one that you described also, when we moved to this 100% remote workforce, even if it wasn't permanent for some businesses, it was at least temporary. One of the realities that I think was kind of overlooked was once you do that, you lose your ability, or let's call it your traditional, in the traditional sense, you lose your ability to implement policy and controls on your workforce, because whereas before you had an enterprise in some type of that had an edge that you could defend, essentially annihilated that. That's
Yeah.
gone. Now the edge
Yeah.
is all the way out to your employee's premise, and their device is on a network that is, potentially
Starbucks.
compromised with, yeah, exactly, with
They could
who
be working
knows
at
what,
Starbucks.
and whatever else, yeah, and or even at home,
That's right.
in some cases, you're a shared. There's a lot of folks working at home presently who have, teenage kids who live with them as well, that are on that same network, not
Sure.
typically the same device. I have noticed that that kind of our big worry was that, like, since you're working from home, that these kids would be on the same computers and things like that. But that turned out to not be so real of a threat. But as far as the cleanliness of these networks, that for sure has turned out to be a problem. And adversaries are aware of that. So what they have been doing is, once you get a foothold on even a home network, is look to see what else is there. Because if, like, for example, if your device names are suggestive of a big corporate environment, and someone has broken into, say, what they believe is some Comcast residential network device, that's all they know about it, and say they get into the browser through some type of typical browser exploit, drop some type of access, and get onto the access. Next order of business is just be scanning to see what else is there, and almost treating all these little home network breaches that people get access to. They're almost treating them like a big network break-in, and it's because they know that they can turn those into that if they find the right home network that they've compromised. And so people have been focusing on that. In particular, these initial access brokers. If you're not familiar with that, there are people who that's all they do is they go out and get footholds on networks all over the world, and then they sell that access to people. And oftentimes it's simply based on what's the domain access, and if it's juicy enough, people will pay you for it. And how they're finding that is, like I said, one device on the network gets compromised. That device, that asset doesn't have access to important assets, corporate assets. But from that device, they then get access to the other device, and go from there. Or also through small office, home office routers. That is still also a big problem as well. Redirect and hold people's traffic, or sniffing all those communications as they come and go. That stuff is all happening, and that is that mobile access or let's call it all remote workforce. That I am not surprised at all to hear is a huge issue. So, and our
So what
tool
about
lets people see that stuff for what it's worth. So that's another use case that some of our partners have been using. In particular, right when the pandemic was announced, and the kind of everyone had to work from home, we had a number of our partners immediately pivot their operations to include, as their employees were connecting to their VPN logs, they were feeding those VPN access logs directly into our platform, looking for reputational indicators of compromise and things like that, so that they could handle those employees, appropriately, whether it be, apply additional controls, or actually contact them and say, we can't let you back into the VPN until you fix this or this. But we have partners who made use of that use case immediately.
That's definitely good. Now, when the way you describe it, like, hey, being more aware of what all the attacks that are, let's say, on the internet, or as many as you can, are, it makes total sense in helping to stop them. This is my last question for you is more of an industry, maybe vision question, and that is, there's this idea going around right now that people are trying to develop AI to preemptively be able to learn and stop digital compromise, digital attacks, whatever you want to call them, right? Threat detection.
Mhm.
And there's this idea that, like, is it, so the question is, I'm curious for you, is how far away do you think AI can be until the point where like a cybersecurity professional isn't as needed because it is now threat detecting everything in your favor? We hear this discussion all the time because the reality is if that is developed, then the bad actors can also use AI to beat your AI, right? It's like now it's going to be like a battle of who can model the best AI to trick an AI to get a threat inside of a network to do whatever it is they're going to do next.
Yeah, I think it would be. I don't want to use a heavy word like reckless, but something close to that for us to completely rely on AI.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's very, very, very important that we always remember that crime, whether it be financially motivated, politically motivated, whatever the motivation is a very human thing, and it's a mistake for us to imagine that we could train models to guess all of that kind of gray area. Now, could we augment those capabilities with AI? I believe so. I think
Yeah.
it's possible that we could develop an understanding of kind of signaling to say, like, if you see a host start to behave this certain way, within a certain amount of time, you have a likelihood of it turning out to be bad of X%. And if it's above, at, X plus one, automatically apply some type of remediation or mitigation effort on that host. I think that is possible that we could eventually get to that point. I'll use Israel as an example. So when you come and go from the airport in Tel Aviv, they have lots of cameras trained on everyone. They are one of the
Yeah.
greatest facial recognition reliant countries in the world. Up there on par with China and the UK, who are famous for it. Israel is also very, very capable for that. But they still have you interact with a human being. They still have that person validates kind of your interactions, just those things that you can't quite figure out with machines. They have a person there. So I think it's more likely that we will always have to have some type of human touch in there. The other piece that I think often gets overlooked when everybody considers AI modeling is the data transit requirements. So you have to have data to train your models. The models
Yep.
then have to have data to try to understand things. And I can tell you that hauling back metadata at a large enough footprint is a non-trivial problem. So if
Yeah.
you were to feed, the entirety if we just took metadata alone, I would wager global metadata production globally, and this is just internet links. This isn't counting cross-exchange traffic and things like that, but actual, cross-transit world, I bet is upwards of a petabyte an hour. Probably more. And that's just the metadata. That's not content. That's
Yeah,
just
that's not
this
content.
IP
That's not.
spoke to this IP at this time at this protocol. And I bet we're into the
That's
petabytes
insane.
per hour. So imagine needing to get that data somewhere so that it could be monitored by AI and go from and then start to make decisions off of it. That alone, I think the data plumbing piece of that alone would be non-trivial. I think it would be non-trivial even just for a network and enterprise to run its local traffic into some type of AI learning mechanism. I think that signal alone, depending like Google or an Apple or someone like this or a Microsoft who has massive global infrastructure, imagine trying to backhaul all of that signal into some type of AI mechanism. That would be just not easy. It's way more likely to be able to hire and train up human beings so that they can go out and look at the disparate pieces of what you have than it would be to try to get all of that signal back to one place to be processed.
No, and I appreciate you answering that question. Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree because, um, just from all the cybersecurity experts we've talked to, is they're always talking about, hey, like the problem is always going to be signal to noise. Like is AI going to be recognize a first time threat? Like that's very hard to believe that they
Very
can
hard.
recognize that.
Yeah, very
You'll have
hard.
no data reference whatsoever that thing exists. And then, of
That's
course,
right.
in this report, we saw that the number one threat they still say is phishing, which is pretending like getting basically for everyone that's not aware. Phishing, that's literally getting the keys inside the infrastructure. That's not even a hack. Like once I have the keys, it doesn't matter.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And it still is a major problem. And that you touch on that. That's a good indicator of what's the likelihood of us having some kind of Star Trek like future where AI is solving our problems. We can't even solve something as trivial as not clicking on phishing links or responding to phishing mail. Our chances of solving this other one seem even less likely when you look at it through that lens. So yeah. So I guess fortunately for the humans, we're going to be continue to be employed in this way. So
Yeah.
that's good for us.
Yeah, if you're looking for a career where you're probably always going to have a new problem to solve, you'll never be not needed. It is without a doubt cybersecurity. Dave,
Absolutely.
I want to say thank you for joining us on our show today. But before you go, it is time for the lightning round. The lightning round is brought to us by Salesforce platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Dave, this is where we ask you questions outside of the realm of work, so our
Sure.
audience can get to know you a little better. Are you ready?
Sure. Shoot.
All right. You said you served in the U.S. Military, specifically the U.S. Marines. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, now Marines have a bad rap of not being the brightest bulbs of the military. They get a bad rap for it. The joke is always that they eat crayons. How did you get into cybersecurity to begin with?
Well, the funny thing is there's a lot of fiber in those wrappers, by the way. So eating crayons isn't all that bad for you. But no, I am just naturally adept to kind of solving these types of problems. I don't have much academic experience outside of I was briefly adjunct professor at a university, so I've taught, but I've not sat much in classrooms. I have just born this way, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it. So dumb luck.
What was the best indicator from your childhood that you were going to be building defense systems? Were you a builder? Did you
Yeah.
create stuff?
No, I was kind of on the other side of the thing, so I'm a good blue teamer
Oh, you were
because
smashing things.
I have a miscreant mind, yeah, something like that. But the first indicator, as was told to me, was I got caught for making my own report cards for myself and anybody else who wanted to pay me in high school for a couple years. So, and that was when my parents were like, that's pretty smart. But we went from hand filled out. I'm aging myself here, but we went from handwritten report cards, which had a human signature component to each. Each teacher signed it, and I happened to be going to school when they digitized all of that, and I realized there was a flaw in the mechanism because we had a trusted courier who was me. I was trusted to bring this computer printed out report card home, but there was no human component to it. So I realized quickly if I could get access to a printer, I could just print these out. So that's what I did.
There you go. Hey, listen. Hey,
Yeah.
it's not where you start, man. It's where you end up, right? So
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
What do you like to do for fun outside of work?
Jiu-jitsu, submission grappling. That's where I spent most of my time doing that stuff. When not doing that, probably French food, cooking French food.
Okay, you have picked. I'm aware of BJJ. I've practiced myself. What belt ranking have you achieved now?
I'm still a white belt, so I'm working my way to
Listen.
blue. So
The problem with jiu-jitsu is, and as a like a career white belt myself, is you think that you know a move. You always think you know something, and then the guy you go against or the gal you go against has like a counter move to every move. There's a counter move. It is human chess. Definitely a
yeah,
thought. Like it's a thought. Like, well, I won't say the people that are experienced don't need to think, but when you're a white belt like us, like your
yeah.
mind gets clouded in thought.
It is very cerebral. It is very cerebral.
Yeah.
I do it. I try to do it 4 days a week, and then I sprinkle in
that's dedication.
some Muay Thai in there as well. But it's probably it's probably the most rewarding part of my day because it's like you said, it's like 4D chess, and you have to really be like paying attention to little nuanced things like your adversary's heart rate, keeping your head pressed to them, and you can hear if they're actually tired or pretending, things like that. But yeah, I love it. But I do gi and no gi both, and really prefer gi, I think. But but the nogi stuff, just submission grappling, if you will, it has also been a lot of fun.
Now, are you a good leg player? Because
I,
leg
I,
players
I
have such an advantage.
Yeah, I try to be well-rounded. I'm 48, so I don't have kind of the flexibility to hit some of those, especially like heel hooks and things like that. Just landing them, just pulling them up are hard. But I'm pretty strong, so I can withstand a lot of that joint lock pressure because I have a pretty good muscular form. But yeah, I try to get those, but it's tricky when you're old and slow. It's tricky. So I try to do a more even approach. I do a lot of pressure passing. I'll say that. I try to be heavy as much as I can.
Well, that's my specialty, man. I weigh 248 pounds. So yeah,
Yeah, we're in the same boat.
If I can.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. Yeah, exactly. Now and then imagine being 48 on top of it. So I spend a lot of time coming up from my knees. So.
Hey, listen. All I know is this: there's a guy at my gym. He's a very good leg player, but not just attacking your legs, but he uses his legs to manipulate your body. I always feel like he's the puppet master, and I'm the puppet. Like I feel like he flips me instantly because his feet are so good.
Yeah, same here. I have people do that. They do that a lot. I'm trying to think of the guy's name, the De La something guard.
De La Hiva.
Like De La Hiva, that's the last name. Yeah, but that kind of hip play, that spin the person completely with your feet. It reminds me of used to see seals in the circus or bears spinning the ball with their feet. It always makes me feel like I'm the ball at the circus being spun on something's feet. But I try to make those as expensive as possible for those folks. So
yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. As you're following, you're like, how did this happen?
How did I get here? Yeah, no, it happens a lot.
Dave, thanks for joining us today on IT Visionaries. Thanks for sharing a little bit about your personal life, your love of jiu-jitsu, your career in the military, and of course, some of the stuff you're doing at Cymru with the threat reconnaissance and how your company views cybersecurity.
Yeah, thank you, Albert. It's always a pleasure for us, in particular, having the chance to try to turn people on to new concepts. It's not easy, so having folks like yourself willing to have us come on and talk about it, we're always grateful for that. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on IT Visionaries.